Real Enigmas and Theories is back again with another video. I'm your mama, I'm your daddy, I'm that ninja in the alley. Need some coke, need some reefer, need some liquor, need some ether. I'm your pusher man. Yeah, this episode was crazy, y'all. Let's have a moment of silence for all the guys who tried to do an Apple TV and chill type situation with this episode. That shit was over before you even got a chance to march the mellows. I mean, the story about Dieter nutting on the ground was longer than this episode. They could have just tacked this on the back of episode 7 and gave us 9 episodes like the 9 core principles in season 1. Either way, we just got 2 episodes left, and it was good as hell, but this was short too. But this episode was kind of crazy, and it contained a huge plot twist. This is also the episode where several things that I brought up on this channel have now revealed themselves, and we're definitely going to talk about it. We got to see a vulnerable Cobell, a little bit of her upbringing, and she got an old flame that looks like he's the plug of sorts in this little bizarre town of theirs. We learned that Devin actually makes contact with Cobell, and that breathing tube is her mother's breathing tube. We learned that Cobell left home around the age of 12 and that her family has been wrapped up in Lumen for generations. Not to mention, Ben Stiller has shown us what Magda from Something About Mary turned out to look like. And yo, I gotta say this. When the edges of your coat hood start looking like this, it's time to let that shit go. That John looked like she hit that shit with one of them hair sponges. I think she was going for this look right here. Old boy did say he liked the new dude. But anyway, let's get to this short ass episode. But before we do that, I'd like to thank everybody out there for watching. And if you're new here, welcome. This video will contain spoilers for Severance Season 2, Episode 8. So without further ado, let's pull out those magnifying glasses and cook. This episode starts with some beautiful establishment shots of Newfoundland, and that's where they filmed this episode. We see Cobell driving into Salt's Neck and pulling up on the Drippy Pot Diner. And I know why they call it that place. They call it the Drippy Pot because everybody's nose is dripping from huffing on ether. Shit, what happens when all the ether runs out though? They gonna be sniffing salt like it's coke out this bitch. They should call this place Salt's Next because after the ether runs out, salt's next. But anyway, she bumps into the plug, and it's kind of crazy that someone can leave town for years and come back and know right where your ass is at. That means you ain't been about shit since they've been gone. And you right there standing in the same place, huffing on the same ether, drinking the same coffee from the Drippy Pot. And now I get why he said this part.
You know how fucked it is to ask me to come here.
That's because that's where he gets his supply at. And I have to say this. It might appear that these people are all sick from being ether addicts, but that is not the case. I revealed something in about 2 other videos before this one, and you might want to go check those out. We'll talk a little bit about it here, but I go deeper into it in the original videos. I showed a Care Chronicle article about a lawsuit against Lumen for poisoning the water supply of Salt's Neck. I found this article on the Instagram page of the actual Chinese restaurant that they used to film episode 6 in Kingston, New York. They had a bunch of dope shit on their page related to Severance, but this article right here stuck out to me because it was on the Care Chronicle. And in my other videos, I talked about the people in Salt's Neck being sick and Cobell's mother possibly being a casualty of the alcohol spill in their water. So this is what actually has the people sick. They're not like addicts and they just got sick from working there. They actually had a serious tragedy in their town. This Lumen plant has spilled a bunch of alcohol in their water system. This article is a crazy find. Now I'm gonna skip over a bunch of shit because this episode was a little bit short and we're gonna get right to the real meat and potatoes because there's actually a lot to talk about. So we learned that Cobell left home around the age of 12 because that's where her height and age marks end at. And I couldn't help but notice the way her name was written on the wall. For 9 and 11, her name was written with a capital H and the rest was lowercase. And that's how most of us write our names. But 10 and 12 were written in all caps like we find on our ID cards, credit cards, birth certificates, social security cards, and just about any piece of mail that you receive. Now this is called capitis diminutio maxima. That's capitis diminutio maxima. And in ancient Roman law, capitis diminutio means the loss of status. And it's often displayed in legal documents and inscriptions throughout changes in a person's name and how it was written. This distinction was important because it visually indicated different levels of legal status or the lack thereof. For instance, if a name is written with only the first letter capitalized like how most of us do it, then it's called capitis diminutio minima, which is the smallest loss of status. However, names written in all caps were known as capitis diminutio maxima, and that was used to signify the loss of all legal rights, citizenship, freedom, and family rights. And if that person was enslaved, the person's Roman name was erased and replaced with a slave name given by their master, and that name would be in all capital letters. And in legal records, their previous name might not have even been recorded, and that signified that they were now property and not a person. Now, the biggest plot twist of this episode was that, even in this whole series, the biggest plot twist is the revelation that Cobell is the creator of the Severance chip and technology and all of the protocols. And this explains why she was running the experiments with the severed employees. And it makes it even more crazy when you think about how they fired her and didn't give her credit for her intellectual property. And property is the key word here. Seeing Cobell's name written twice like that definitely has a hidden meaning to it, and it ties back to this original concept itself. Lumen had harmony there, and Jane Egan took her invention as if she was a slave. And this ties right back to the salve and slave anagram. We're talking local industry and child labor. So anything that slave makes, the owner owns that. Now, I think I'm the only one out there that made the connection to the alleged Kier being the snake oil salesman and the possibility of him putting ether into his products to have a drug effect on his patients. And to see people in this town actually getting high on ether speaks directly to that. And I definitely didn't think we was going to see Cobell getting down right on her mother's bed like that. And then kissing old boy right there too. You have to know that man's breath smelled like ass and cigarettes. Ain't no way around it. But I was even more excited about Cobell's aunt having that whole voodoo shrine like Cobell's shit in her basement. She also rocks the white gown like Cobell, representing reverence and purity, just like a voodoo practitioner. She had some kind of vertebrae bone, matches for the candles and burnt offering. She had glass vessels with the 4 tempers, herbs, fruit offerings, a symbolic bird cage, and the altar for the ancestral respects. She had the newspaper. They really took us back to season 1 with a stark reminder of the devotion that we saw in Cobell. And not only that shit was giving heavy voodoo ritual vibes. But I did think that she was going to break up Aunt Sissy's shrine when she screamed out, "I found it!" I thought she was going to turn around and tear her shrine up like she did hers. And then I had a comment in my last live stream saying that these people aren't performing rituals and spell casting. Ha! And what good is brushing your teeth if you going to put some shit like this in your mouth? Look at that caked on dust. That shit got more dust than a ceiling fan in a crack house. Then you kiss the guy who's been sitting outside in a cold-ass truck for hours huffing ether like it's Suge Avery's bathwater. I am appalled. Hasn't this guy heard the phrase, "don't get high on your own supply"? I'm telling you, salt's next. But I can't even blame Cobell for getting high because her aunt slapped the bullshit out of her. I was surprised when Cobell didn't hit her back. That shit was harder than when Boyd slapped Frank on From.
It got late and I didn't... It got late and I didn't.
I mean, after she hit her, I just couldn't help but kept looking for a handprint on her cheek and shit. I was like, yo, where's the handprint at? She slapped the shit out of her. I mean, that old lady didn't even wind up. She just went straight from the hip. You hit me like that, we be in there tearing that raggedy motherfucker down. Cobell must know that Aunt Sissy is with all the smoke because I just don't see her backing down like she did. That was crazy. I mean, I'm sitting right here looking at the sound wave in my editing software, and that slap is literally the loudest sound effect in the entire episode. No bullshit. Upon finding out how long this episode was gonna be, I thought that my breakdown wouldn't be that long due to the episode only being a little bit over 30 minutes. But no intro sequence, plus a lot of things that I've been saying in my videos showing up in this episode, I think we may have some things that we can address. I remember saying that Lumen might be listening through the lights in several places inside and outside of Lumen, and I noticed that this town had no electric lighting and there seemed to be a lot of oil lamps. And I believe that they purposely made that point by making Cobell fall asleep all the way until nighttime so that they could show us young Ether coming in the room with that oil lamp. Now, we talked about the people in Salt's Neck being sick from the alcohol spill in the water, but we have to mention that red ball game in season 1 where Milchick mentions that Ellie had weak enamel on her teeth. And then we see the smile room with all the teeth over there by the perpetuity wing. And then we saw Dr. Peabody come get the dental supplies from O&D. There's also been a significant mention of Grand Rapids, which is the very first place in the entire world to put fluoride in the water supply. And I find it strange for this show's lore to include an article about contaminating water and then the mention of Grand Rapids. That's gotta be a connection. The article speaks about people being sick and an ongoing lawsuit with Lumen for accountability. And we also briefly brought up the snake oil salesman period in which Creer lived in. And this was a time when a traveling salesman would target poor communities and promise them miracle cures and embed themselves into carnivals and traveling circuses, going from town to town to rip the people off that were already poor and vulnerable. And we see the same thing here going on in Salt's Neck, but it's on a deeper level. I talked about the possibility of Keir putting ether into his products in order to control and persuade people into his cult. And that's what this shit looks like. But it seems like the town has turned on Lumen because of what they've done. It's obvious that they weren't against Lumen the whole time because the plant was obviously there and it was where people worked and it was probably feeding everybody. But after that spill, Lumen got out of Dodge, a bunch of people got sick, and now everybody hates Lumen except for Sissy. Now, we also talked about Milchick and his paper clips being a reference to Project Paperclip and the Nazis being brought into America for their expertise in human testing, aerospace, mind control experiments, and more. But the thing about it is the United States had already had mind control programs years before World War II. They were literally using hypnosis to make Manchurian candidates that had several different alters that they didn't know one from the other, just like the Severance chip does. Your innie doesn't know the outie and the outie doesn't know the innie. And the American government was already having programs in place like this before World War II, before Operation Paperclip. Now, I've been noticing all of the coffee references in this show, and they could have multiple hidden meanings. But I found it even more intriguing when I saw the coffee references again in this episode, very much how we've been used to seeing them in other places on the show. I mean, they focused in on the coffee pot, and Cobell even asked Dude to buy her a cup so she could use that table and talk to him for a second. Even these voodoo references with Sissy's shrine reminds me of Haitian voodoo with the white robes. It also makes me think about pineapples being used in voodoo love spells. But we'll talk about the pineapples later because the pineal gland references showed up in this episode too. And I definitely got to talk about that. I mean, I've been talking about the pineapple and the pineal gland references, and it's definitely confirmed with this episode right here. I thought that the coffee reference could have been tied to the Haitian voodoo symbolism as well because coffee was a major slave crop in Haiti. but I didn't think that connection was strong enough. So I think the coffee references might have something to do with the mind control efforts by the U.S. long before the World War II. There was an FBI agent named E.P. Coffee, and he was the head director of technical laboratories in Washington, D.C. during 1936, and he was sent to work with a man named George Estabrooks. The crazy shit is, Coffee was actually sent by J. Edgar Hoover, and Estabrooks had proven hypnosis techniques that could essentially program Manchurian soldiers and spies, and he had done this for the United States government. Now here's some receipts that you can pause and read them later. And by the way, if you're liking this video, go ahead and do all that dope YouTube stuff for me. Thank you in advance. Now let's go back in. Something else I've talked about on my channel is the pineapples and their connection to the actual severance procedure. And it's just not a nice treat that Milchick brings in a basket or a horrible perk on the severance floor. The pineapples have a hidden connection to the severance chip, where the severance chip is placed. And now with this new revelation, it's also connected to something that we saw, the maker and how it was made. So the pineapple and the pineal gland get their names from the pine cone due to its shape. The pineal gland is known as the third eye because it's actually sensitive to light, and it regulates the production of melatonin and the different levels of consciousness, something that the science behind the severed chips would have to affect in order for the severance procedure to work. Because we saw that when the chip is implanted in the brain, the little anchor legs trip out, and then the subject falls to sleep. And then the subject is taken downstairs to the severed floor, placed on a table where they wake up. The pineal gland controls physiologic functions that relate to the circadian rhythm. And that chip is also implanted close to the pineal gland, which is shown to us during Helena's procedure as well. Now, a philosopher and mathematician by the name of René Descartes believed that the pineal gland was the seat of the soul. And we see this play out in both of the intro sequences, with Mark jumping down into the seat of his brain. And the look of the computer even appears to be a calcified pineal gland, which points right back to the fluoride connection, because fluoride accumulates in the pineal gland. When we get some of those shots of Cobell's proprietary sketches and her plans for the severance technology, the mathematical grid system that she used in her drawings are example of Cartesian space. Cartesian space is that X, Y, Z axis and the center point. And we use that when we're trying to draw 3D objects on a 2D piece of paper. Now, this is important because the severance chip and the pineal gland is in the geometric center of the brain. And we saw this when Ragabi was toying around with Mark's brain. We saw that it was slightly to the right, but it was in the center region of the brain. And that's where the pineal gland is. And what makes this connection so crazy is not Cobell using the Cartesian space in her drawings, but the man who invented Cartesian spaces is none other than René Descartes, the same man who named the pineal gland the seat of the soul. And if you know me and you've been watching my channel, you know damn well that I hit the roof when I saw the Cartesian space coordinates depicted in her drawings. I was lit. It totally made up for the episode being short for me personally. So I'd have to say that this episode slaps. And then we got Cobell actually answering the phone for Devin and ending up on the phone with Mark as a cliffhanger. That shit was perfect. This episode was shot beautifully and definitely had those mini movie vibes that we had from episode 4 and episode 7. And with the big reveal of Cobell being the brains behind the severance technology and the esoteric symbolism involved with it, oh, it totally worked out for me. So there you have it. Some jokes, some tinfoil, some facts wrapped in history, a list of connections from this episode that I've already been talking about since the beginning of this season, and some dope theories. And if you like this video, go ahead and tap that screen for me a couple of times by liking, sharing, getting ready to hop down in the comments and get the conversation started. And if you're not subscribed, hopefully this will be the video to make you do it. Anyway, just a little something to think about while we wait on the next episode. That's all for my video today. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.